everybody, welcome back. Yep. Hey, what's going on? This is Taylor, sheepish, whatever the hell you'd like to call me. Within reason, please. But we're back again today with another video. Today we are going to be specifically looking at the genesis of a character. You know, how they change from their original concept to, well, for the instance of this video, 10 years. We're gonna be looking at my character, Joss, who I came up with probably around 10 years ago. We'll go through the entire process of how he's changed, my thoughts at the time, my thoughts over time, the importance of putting intent behind that drawing or that goal of whatever you're doing. You know, while I don't necessarily need this to be exclusive to artists, I do want this to be applicable to a lot of people. I want it to be, I don't necessarily say inspirational. That sounds like I'm full of myself and I'm sniffing my own ass. But I do want it to be, I want it to be thought-provoking. I want it to show you that if you keep with something, if you have the tenacity and the determination to see something through and to a state you're happy with, that it doesn't matter if the first time around it doesn't work out. Because you can get there and it can turn to something that you're proud of, like this video. I will say that this video is long, so I apologize about that if you don't necessarily care for long form content. I do. I like long form content quite a lot, so I won't say every video will be this length, but if it's not for you, I understand. Either way, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know. If you do like it, if you don't like it, your feelings on the video in general. If you want to like, comment, subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. We're just starting out here, and I'm excited to keep making videos for you. So yeah, stick around, it should be fun. Obligatory coffee sip. Yeah, it's cold. I've filmed this like 3 or 4 times now. But if you like what I got, then stick around. I'll see you then. All right, kids, back at it again. So I'm sure I just explained the intro what we're doing today, so let's just dive right in. We're gonna start with the first photo. And I apologize. Some of these are sketches, real rough, obviously like this first photo, pretty general. They're also just photos that I took of old notebooks and sketch pads I have. I did not feel like scanning all of these in, so I apologize if they're a little, you know, faint or smudgy, you know, happens with pen, paper. These aren't pen drawings, these are pencil. You know what I mean, shut up. Okay, so first, here's the genesis of Joss. I suppose I should clarify who Joss is. So in my first video, I showed Nona. Nona is my OC, Joss is the other lead character. Technically he's secondary to her, but they're both kind of sort of dual leads. Joss was the founding of the story. I'm not going to get into the story here, we'll get to that at a later point, but he was the original character I came up with, which spawned the idea and led me kind of to keep coming back to it over time. So here, what was I thinking? What did I start with? So I knew originally Joss was going to be a reaper or death. Basically taking souls was his task. That's expanded over time, but the foundation of it has remained the same. Things that are unique about this specific drawing, things that remain consistent going forward. So he started younger. He started as a kid, essentially, late teens, early 20s, likely not that old, if we're being really clear. Oh, hi Quoth, everybody say hi to Quoth. He will ever stop crying in my videos. His costume here, didn't really know what I was doing. Originally thought a mask would be cool. I believe at the time I was watching, a few things I had watched. I believe I had watched, anime. Let's start there. I believe I had watched Soul Eater. I believe I had watched Death Note, and I believe at this time I had probably also seen Tokyo Ghoul. Timing could be off on some of these things. But this drawing specifically, and again, sorry if you hear Quoth talking at all, he's trying to lay down, so hopefully that means he won't talk after this. Let's all hope. Or if you like it and it's not too distracting, then there you go. I'm sorry, he's hopefully quiet now. But anyway, I thought a mask would be interesting. I like the idea of the skull representation. Insert cut here of Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, where death is literally a skeleton. So I like that idea. I always like the idea of a top hat. Outside of that, I wasn't sure much of his costume. You can see here it's maybe a jacket, it's maybe some pants with a belt. So let's go into the second drawing. And hopefully, when I edit this, we'll be showing maybe 2 drawings at a time on the screen, so you can kind of see, some transition periods as it evolves over time. The second one just kind of focuses on his face. You can see here my style was still, obviously, as I talked about, super influenced by anime. Nothing unique here, really, aside from maybe he had a bit of an attitude and maybe he had some longer hair that kind of got in his face as a base idea. Third drawing expands on that a little further. This one's a little more inked out. Maybe that's worth saying too. All of my drawings at this time were, pencil and paper, and then I got into ink pens. What are those pens called? The manga pens that you can get from like every hobby store, the brown ones. You know what I'm talking about. I still have them somewhere, but I really enjoyed those this time. So all of my, pencil drawings that I kept, I inked out to make them look more, I guess maybe keep them permanently, but make them look better, give more contrast to the colors. So again, photo here, about the same, maybe a little more stoic. Hair is just shown as dark. Fourth photo zoomed in, again, similar to the last one, but still showing that hat. That hat, again, is going to be a key feature going forward. The one that really delves into what he's going to look like is drawing 5. So drawing 5 is the culmination of all of those original sketches. I was really happy with this one at the time. It's obviously when I saved, I fully inked it out. And this drawing is one that kept me, thinking of this idea. Made me return to this idea every so often. So, this one he retains the mask. He has the hat. He has a scythe, going further into the, general Grim Reaper vibes. What should I say here? I think that's kind of retained in some of my style. Maybe you'll see that as we go along. I do like to play with sharp lines, but I do like to transition into smooth lines. Here, though, I think I primarily stuck with mostly sharper lines this time. But most importantly out of all of these is you can see his hat has an eyeball. That will retain through all versions going forward. Best of my knowledge, at least for the most part, aside from weird one-offs where I tried weird things. But his hat being sentient is a huge part of his character. At this time, I don't believe it was a secondary character, which it is now. I think it was more a further manifestation of his power, but that's going to be a unique trait going forward. So yeah, I'm going to call this drawing specifically, let's say Joss 1.0. Again, at the time, he did not have a name. It was, again, probably Death, as generic as that is, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So yes, the following drawing now. So this one may look unrelated. I mean, the drawing on the right, you can see maybe a few similarities to the last one. With the hat, the shoulder spikes. Those shoulder spikes are, at least from my recollection of that costume, are super reminiscent of Death Note. I cannot think of the main demon's name. I'll obviously throw a photo of him here, but yeah, I was heavily inspired by that at the time, at least with the aesthetic of this, because, they're both death demon-y creature things, so anyway. This drawing. So at this point, I considered the idea of playing with a duality, where there was, if he was death, maybe there was an angelic force. You can see the character on the left has some halos above his head, more maybe traditional robe up top kind of thing. Again, it's pretty generic. It's an early rough draft. But that was something I had played around with. Whether that would have been two sides to Joss or a second character, but I was trying to think of a world a little bit. This is before much had really come about. This was probably either in college or right after college. So I would say around 20. I would have been around 20. I'm 30 now for reference. So about 10 years ago. That would be my guess. Yeah, that's probably all I have to say about this piece. Now, here is the start of the next Joss. Again, this one's very generic. This one, honestly, probably came pretty close after those last set of drawings, because for my recollection, there's a little bit of a time span after this specifically. But here we have, we've retained the hat. There's not much of an outfit, but he's a little bit older. He has facial hair now. He has sideburns or mutton chops, and he's smoking a pipe. The pipe and that facial hair will be extremely relevant going forward, but at this point they were real rough. There wasn't much of a huge thought aside from, hey, that kind of looks cool. Yeah, again, I didn't have much of a story here, but I was playing around with the ideas. I wasn't cemented in the previous versions. I think at the time I thought maybe he was reading too young, so I was like, okay, let's age him up a little bit. If I was going to make a story, I wanted him to have some weight. I wanted him to feel like he could have knowledge or background, so I wanted him a little bit older. All right, now here we really start diving into Joss 2.0. And I guess we can... There's going to be basically 3 drawings right around the same exact time, probably within, a few days or so of each other, that they were drawn, and they really solidified Joss 2.0. So here we have him. I made him very tall and lanky. He definitely looks a little bit older. He has long hair now, retaining the top hat. Here I actually put the eyeball on his belt. I think at the time I believed maybe I would have it swap between the two. If he wasn't wearing his hat, it might manifest on his belt. His scythe, I tried to play around and make it so it could be a cane. And yeah, overall, I still think this looks very much like, if I say it wrong, the Shinigami or the monsters, the demons from Death Note. Again, I'll make sure to throw those in if I haven't already, but you can definitely see some resemblances in his weird quirkiness, kind of absent eyes, not much of a personality kind of stare. He's got weird chunky platform boots that I don't know, and like coattails that hang down. I'm not sure what the full thought process is, but I'll say this, and I'm hopefully getting better. It's an active effort, because for the longest time I was like, yeah, I'll just draw, really strong ripped dudes or just faces, but they don't need to have a bunch of clothes. I didn't need to focus on those, especially if I'm doing fan art. So when it came to my own stuff, I was god awful at trying to come up with clothing. I think I still am, but here is a same exact Joss. He is just standing, so try to get in a different variation on that. The eye is on his head again, but relatively the same pose, so we're going to go past this one pretty quick. The next one is significant because, here we go, is a close-up photo of his face. It is a profile shot, obviously, but this version of Joss, this face, longer, bigger nose, I never really colored him at this time, or fully rendered a piece. You can see this isn't even inked out, which I'm honestly surprised that I never got around to it, because this is another key piece for me that made me think about this character. You can see the hat and eyeball are very prominent. Again, it wasn't a secondary character from the best of my memory. Has that long hair. He has white eyes, basically, so he's supposed to be kind of evil and demonic. I think I believe that his mentality can transition between the eye and himself. So if the eye was open, maybe his eyes would wide out. I think that's what my thought process was. Behind his back ear, which I know it's hard to see, and I think I have more shots that will clarify it going forward. Here I played around with that whole smoking theme, and at the time I did a like a cigarette holder, like those long, like elegant sticks that would hold a cigarette. He has that behind his back ear. I was still playing around with more religious symbolism because you can see the upside down cross and his earrings. But yeah, here I think, I never said it out loud to myself, but I kind of pictured him as Jamaican, at least dark skinned, somewhere between Tarzan, which I know isn't Jamaican, but as a general aesthetic, but somewhere between like Tarzan and I'm trying to think of a Jamaican character outside of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. So maybe I fuse the two because that Grim Reaper character is Jamaican. He speaks with a Jamaican accent. So I assume that probably influenced me in some capacity with this interpretation. But I would again call this Joss full 2.0. At this point, if we go to the next drawing, here I was actually considering story. So here is the first, or one of the first instances, the first one that you've seen of Nona. Not called Nona, not Native American, no relation at all. Obviously, you can really see the anime aesthetic in her design, more so than him. Just his features are a little bit, different, a little more maybe Western or so, just stronger. But she has traditional anime eyes. I know it's further away, so we're not focusing on her, but the idea at this moment, you can see smoke is now extremely relevant. He's breathing out smoke from his nose, and it is going around a corner. The point of that smoke is it is supposed to be a lure. What I had decided at the time is that the smoke would be a lure, and it would take on the form of a smell of whoever smelled it, their favorite smell. I think at the time I had thought about doing like a cherry smoke. I don't know why, I just like the idea of it. But what the point was is that it would draw people in. Once they would come, he would basically take their souls. Character design here again is exactly what we've seen, but here there was more purpose behind it. There was more intent. Next photo plays into that further. I started doing a couple pages, like an intro basically of what a comic or a story could be, and I've played around with a lot of stories over time. This is the one that I've gone back to, modified, totally changed, but come back to a lot. Other ones I've just bailed on and haven't returned to, but this is the one that is relevant long term. So I thought it'd be a really interesting journey to show how character can change and how your art style can change, and I guess I want it to be motivational to some degree because, for me, telling stories has always been a huge part of my life, and art and drawing in general. But telling stories, I did a lot of acting in my past. I've done a lot of drawing. I watch a lot of media, and it all kind of comes down to that point. And I've tried to come up with many characters and shows over the years, and I've got stuck because I thought my art wasn't good enough, or I thought I wasn't able to deliver, or I didn't have the time to put into it. But I've always come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. So I know it's something that I've wanted, which is why, again, I'm leaning into it now and really trying to develop my own story. All that to say is that this was the start of that. So I wanted to show this process because, it's worth proceeding that. It's worth following that dream. It's worth following that goal, and it's worth coming back to your old ideas. I'm ecstatic that I have these old drawings to go back to, that I can see the growth in myself as an artist, as a storyteller, as a designer, and just as a human, because my whole perspective and ideas on this character and what they mean and what they symbolize and who they are has changed a lot. Rant over. Sorry, that was long. Or it felt long. I'm talking a lot. Oh, by the way, drinking coffee as per usual. Hope you're all cozy. Hope you're all enjoying yourself. If you are drinking coffee, let me know, because that's what we do here. If it's not too loud, I'll leave my sip in because, ASMR. All right. So this photo, again, compared to the last, nothing too different. Showing at some point they would be a duo. I had actually played around with, like I said, the hat being able to be on Nona at points, and then she might get, powers or something. But yeah, nothing crazy here. So that would be the end of Joss 2.0 to an extent. I could not tell you a time frame. It's probably 3 years before I get to this next one. So this next drawing here we have Joss again. I wanted to come back to him. I had thought about him a lot, or I had seen my own drawings. I don't remember how I came back around at this point, but I did. At this point, I was more into inking. I was actually using black ink and an actual pen that I would dip and everything, as well as the same, manga markers or whatever. So a combination depending on what I was trying to do. But this was to show, I guess, the duality, right? So you can see that this is kind of what I talked about earlier, actually. So this is a good example. The left was just supposed to be general, regular Joss. The right was supposed to be, he's opened the upper eye, so his eye has gone white, and he's blowing out smoke. He's covered in smoke. I really liked how this one turned out. This one, so this is right when this kind of marks, it was either the first or one of the first where I got a printer, thanks to my mom. Thanks, Mom. But it had a scanner on it. So I could scan in my drawings, I could put them on the computer, I could adjust the, gamma, the white balance, all of that, so I could kind of make those lines pop. I could then edit them, but then I could go into coloring digitally. So this next picture is him colored. I decided I liked the smoke side better, so I just duplicated on both sides, made kind of a fun pattern out of that dividing line, and applied some color to it. So this was really, really early in that journey for me, because I'd always played around on doing stuff on the computer, but I had never scanned a drawing in and then modified it or, changed it. It had always been, if I did it on the computer, I had a Wacom, what were they, Bamboo, the ones that were just a drawing, like a sketch tab that you had no screen on, it would just display on your computer, and I hated those because I always like to look at what I'm drawing, and the juxtaposition between my hand and what was on the screen was always like, okay, this is a little hard at first, but so it was either that, which I didn't do much with because again I didn't like that disconnect, or it was playing around in MS Paint and stuff and doing pixel art, and I have a bit of those saved, or a couple of those saved, and we can look at those at another point. But either way, this was a key moment for me. I actually do like this piece. I think it's fun to look at. But yeah, this is still Joss 2.0, but it is a return back to him after several years of not going back to this character. I think it was still within pretty close succession, maybe a year or so. It's hard to say that this next one comes about. But here is what I'll say is transition between Joss 2 and 3, maybe. There's going to be a few drawings here where you'll see where I was just really taking what I liked and trying to do weird things to see if anything stuck, because I liked the character, but I knew something was missing. Again, I didn't really have a story. I had the base story I had before, but nothing really caught me about it. There was not background made up. It was very, very minimal, very light. So this Joss, you can see we've kept the hat, we've kept the long hair, general face structure. He's got the cigarette holder with the cigarette. I gave him sunglasses, same basic jacket with the shoulder spikes. He's got the, cane scythe get up, but for some reason I made him a satyr. I don't know. Animal legs. Demons have animal legs. He's Satan. He's Satan and death at the same time. Because, lack of a visual goal and identity. I don't know. And I guess I didn't want to draw his other hand, so I hid it inside of his ass. You can see it just disappeared entirely. So that's him. The next one, even more weird. I was like, oh yeah, goat's good. I like goat. What if we go more goat? Even more goat. So you can see I tried to accentuate the haunches. I tried to give him horns. I made his eyebrows more evil. I took away the hat and he's smoking and put it in like a weird staff. I don't know what the hell I was doing, but I was trying to do different things. Because I wasn't happy with where it was. And I will say, I think this one and the last one were probably a little bit closer to the colored one I was shown before, but all in a relatively similar time period. This next one, I know for certain there was a time gap, and I won't say that it's Joss entirely, but it was all founded from the idea of Joss. So if we go to it, this one I did ink, and I was coming up with basically a demon character. So, he's actually even older now. He's got long hair, he's smoking, sideburns. He's like a cracked out Colonel Sanders or something. I'm not sure what's going on. He's thin and he's ripped and he's been like on a bender and he's a little bit rough. Retain the hat. I think at the time I thought like, oh, he would become a demon so that the character on the right would also be him in like his true form. I never did anything further with this, but this again was to show that it's okay to try different things. You might have some parts you like, but if you don't push it to that full max extent, you won't be able to know what parts you actually care about or where you feel the identity of the character lies. Again, it would have been a great idea if I would have actually put more time and investment into the background elements of the character to try to suss out who he was, because that would have helped identify how he should look, but, I didn't want to do that. Or I didn't put the effort into doing that. Even though I wanted to make a story, I never put the time and effort into doing it. More or less, I just didn't think I was going to be able to write. I felt very daunted by writing. I actually enjoy it quite a lot now, but that's more of a new development. So most of my, inspiration, well, not inspiration, but most of my efforts into making a story were more just like visual. And if I didn't get the visual exact, I was, feeling defeated, which isn't a good mentality. You should try to iterate on that, but I'm glad that I kept coming back to it. This next one is the last major shift for Joss. So, as you can see, this one was, I think this was done fully digital. At this point, I had a Wacom tablet, the Cintiq, that you could draw on directly, so I could see everything I was doing as I drew. I had wanted a Cintiq for the longest time since I was a kid. I remember seeing them on YouTube and people drawing, and I was like, oh my god, one day it would be the most amazing thing. So I got one, and this wouldn't have been the first thing I drew digitally, but this would have been an early thing I drew entirely digitally. And, Joss came back around. I thought I'd update him. Again, I didn't put any more effort into the story. It was just the base ideas of what I had, but I liked some of the base ideas I had. That's why I just kept coming back to this character. What I decided to do for this interpretation was make him, I guess, more modern, make him a little bit more youthful. So he has darker skin still. I know I hadn't really colored him before, but we talked about that. He's got the hat with an eyeball in it. This time it's more of a bowler style. He has the cigarette holder, which was dual purpose. I remember I actively put effort into this because I made it look somewhat similar to the other scythes, because my thought process would be that he could make that scythe grow. So the cigarette holder would basically become a full-size scythe that he could wield and reap souls or fight with, or, you know, whatever the hell. Did I mention that I'm influenced by shonen and manga and stuff? Because I am. But yeah, I kept that. I got rid of the the cross, or the religious symbolism. He has a feather earring. At this point, and I hadn't talked about before, but a little bit before this, ravens were obviously going to be significant to him. Death, ravens, they all go together. It's generic, but at the time that's what I was going for. His clothes are totally different. Kind of a tank top with long pants, and he's got I wanted to have at least one cool piece of clothing aside from his hat, so I gave him a kind of a unique jacket with like red stitching. Honestly, those shoulder stitches still remind me a lot of Death Note. I think I was still heavily drawing on that because I never put the effort into coming up with a real identity for him. Now, this was a couple years ago at this point. This was probably, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something, that I made this piece. The next Joss you're going to see is Joss, I guess if these were all 2.5s, this will be 3. This is finding Joss to who he is today. This first drawing of Joss would have been made, and we'll open it up here, but this first drawing of Joss would have been made not that long ago, you know, within the year, probably a few months. I've come back to the story, obviously. I've put in a lot of, well, when I made this, I hadn't come up with a lot of background. This was coming back to the character. I wanted to work on the story. I had put some effort into the background of the character, some effort into the world building. I knew the main character was going to be, you know, let's say ethnic in some capacity. I was leaning towards Native American. Hadn't fully settled on it, but I was leaning in that. That would be Nona. And I knew Joss was going to come around and be, you know, a Reaper of sorts. I knew that this time he was going to be, well, I'll say this specific drawing, I didn't know that for certain. The next drawing we show I did, but he was going to be English or British. So as you can see, he longer face still, prominent nose. He does have sideburns here. They're not quite as large. His hair is significantly shorter than it's historically been. I know the last drawing had kind of shaved head, but overall shorter. He has a smoky hat with an eyeball. He's smoking a pipe. This one's actually a peace pipe with an axe blade on it. This is something that I had imagined that he might be able to do. When I came up with this version of the character originally, I thought, as, you know, whenever he would smoke, his apparatus, which is called a veil, because we haven't talked about that, I suppose I will. I had decided that his apparatus that he uses, or his implement, is called a veil. The veil itself can turn into different things. It is both the apparatus, or the peace pipe, or the smoking implement, and the hat. It's the same thing. It is a secondary character named Prim, or Primrose. And I imagine that every time he would make it manifest or come out, it could be a different smoking implement, so a cigarette, a pipe, or whatever. And the hat might alter based on whatever he's using as well. So this is kind of like a wider brim, outbacky kind of hat, maybe. I don't know, it kind of makes me think of Darkwing Duck a little bit. I didn't know what his outfit was going to be. I went with a jacket, I went with suspenders, I went with boots. But again, some of the main themes for Joss retained. This next piece followed up very quickly after the last one. I thought he looked a little bit too sinister in the last one. I want him to feel menacing. I want him to have a presence, but I didn't want him to be necessarily fully evil. So this one, he looks a little bit lighter, even though he has stronger features. Here is where we start focusing on his face. We start focusing on his ethnicity, on his overall design, because we've come up with background for the character, which again, I'm not going to fully get into outside of what I've already discussed. Playing with a jacket here. Wasn't opposed to it. Trying to figure out what his skin tone was. I didn't know if he was going to be super pale, like white and ghostly, or if he was going to have color. Here I have him smoking a pipe. Nothing too insane. But obviously you can see a huge change compared to where we started versus now. The next drawing, I felt very good about this one for a minute. Here I leaned into, the last two that had come before, but I really wanted to accentuate his mouth, kind of the jowls. I was trying to give a wolfish, appearance. I extended the sideburns into maybe more what you would consider mutton chops. I obviously have him smoking a cigarette in this one. And on the left you can see more clearly because I colored this one fully a little bit more. It's more readable, I suppose, but he's got pants, kind of like pantaloons that are tucked into boots with suspenders. You can see that top smaller drawing that he's smoking a pipe, which is manifested in like a cap on his head. You can see the eye there is still remnant, even though that it's not a full, wide brim style hat. I liked this one. I thought for a minute this was going to be his design, but the more I played with it, the more I drew, the more I thought he was just too sinister. I thought he just looked like he was gonna kick your ass and not give a shit about you and not care. He was gonna be ruthless. And as I kept coming up with the character, I knew that wasn't necessarily who he was, even though he'd come off as crude and direct and maybe a little harsh or blunt, perhaps. So now we get into a middle ground. And again, I'm keeping this all as Joss 3.0 because these were all in very close succession and just trying to suss it out. But this next one was my attempt to soften him. I wanted to give him more color. I felt he was a little too pale or hollow. And with him having wider gray eyes, I knew that I didn't want him ghostly pale because it might be hard to distinguish. I played around with orange hair for the first time. I wasn't sure what I wanted his hair to be, but at this point I knew that I really enjoyed the sideburns. I knew that I wanted mutton chops. I knew that I wanted him to be English. Strong features, but again, you can still once we get to the end, you'll see that it changes more so. I'm in a realm of final character design, but it's still a ways off. And I think I went with a low back ponytail here. You can kind of see it going behind his shoulders, but still not certain on his costume, still not solidified on his background. The problem with this one, as you'll see in the next drawing, is this one again. I tried to soften him. I thought he was too evil. Well, after finishing it, I thought, oh, now he's too soft. He's not sinister enough. He doesn't have enough of a presence. So we get to the next drawing. Didn't finish this one, but the face was more refined, so you can still kind of see what's happening. The general same vibes are there, but I actually made him more ghostly. I tried to make him a little bit more sinister looking, a little bit more gaunt as opposed to rounder face as he kind of came off in that last photo. I got rid of the ponytail because I thought it was too soft. Gave him kind of a slick back hairdo, which retains going forward. And yeah, that's kind of the main changes for this specific drawing. Of course, I did this, really liked aspects of it, but it was not satisfied. I knew I wasn't at the design. At this point, I was getting frustrated because I had done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5th one, and I had done these very close back to back, and I just wasn't getting there. You can see the background a little bit too to give a little more context. That again, Nona is Native American, the other lead character, and their story is going to take place in, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, kind of Navajo Nation area, or at least there'll be key points there. So there's like a cactus, and it's kind of a dry, earthy environment. So here I did my next piece, which we'll bring up, and with this one I decided, you know what? I like a lot of things that are happening, but I'm not there. So again, I tried to totally change it. So here we have Joss in not English. I thought, okay, you know what? Maybe the English is the problem because I'm playing with it, it's not working. What if I make him like American Old West, like in a saloon type style? So I gave him kind of a duster. I made it red to keep it a little more evil, I suppose. I gave him like a ribbon tie. And I made him more traditional white with blonde hair. Gave him a cigarette, because I had kind of removed that in the last few drawings. Gave him a white general top hat again. I gave the eye a little more personality. And I feel like in this drawing, I was able to start to strike a balance in the thinness, but still the overall strong features of his face that helps me get towards the end. It helped me get to where I need to go, and it happened because I changed the design so much. So obviously he has a mustache now. He didn't have a mustache. I don't think he ever had a mustache except for like the very first time I drew him with facial hair. But I liked the idea of him having one. The problem was I thought it made him look too soft. I was still in the mindset of he needs to be evil, he is death, he needs to be sinister, but not necessarily, because his actions, his expressions, the way he presents himself can definitely carry that narrative about. But again, you can see here that the smoking implement itself is forming the hat. That has retained. I didn't change that. I still love that. The eyeball is yellow. It has changed a few times, but in my head, even though if I haven't colored these photos, the majority of the time I had thought about this character, the eye would be yellow, Prim would be yellow. But yeah, after finishing this one, I knew, okay, I like things that are happening, but no. For the sake of the narrative, I want to tell, because again, I had focused in on the story more. I knew that I didn't want him to be American. I wanted him to be English. So yeah, in the next drawing, we will go back to that. But first, another sip of coffee. A lot of talking this time. And I've come to realize that, drinking coffee as I'm talking a lot, it does nothing but help, dry out my throat and make it harder to speak. So, I don't give a shit. We're keeping with coffee because I like coffee, and that's what's happening. We could take sips of water, but we're drinking coffee. Okay, next drawing. And I apologize if this comes off as all rambling, because there's a lot to say and there's a lot of drawings, but we're getting very close to the end now, so we're getting, towards the finality of who Joss becomes, or where he resides now, because there's always room for change. And I think that's good. Let's talk about that real quick. I might have touched on it earlier, but I think it's extremely important to not be afraid to change your character. So if you're writing a book, if you're writing a script of any kind, you're drawing, whatever it is, it is healthy and it is constructive to take risks to change your character. So these drawings, some of them have been more rough, but at least some of these last ones where they've been all digitally done, they've been fully colored or mostly colored, they take a long ass time. This one we have up now, again, it's more recent. This one took me a full day or two to fully sketch out, try to refine the features, land on a color profile, land on further design work, because again, we were coming back from we were coming back from an American JOS, returning to English, so trying to fuse all of these things together, like, it can all take a really long time. But it's worth it because it helps you figure out what you like. You know, even something as subtle as changing the eyebrows. At this point, you actually can see, and maybe I should have pointed that out, so hopefully you've been paying really close attention. But even the way I've drawn the eyebrows has changed dramatically. You know, we started with anime eyebrows, which were very like check marks, you know, really, really big, really, really bold, upside down check marks, basically. You know, the in between where I did the colored one for the first time, the first digital one, there were really weird swoopy eyebrows that really didn't make sense. I did that cracked out Colonel Sanders who had scraggly ass eyebrows. Then with these last few versions of JOS, I did kind of a more demonic eyebrow where it puffed in the center, it got thin, and then it did like a jutting forward sharp point to the eyebrow. So like every part of his design is always changing or staying depending on how I like it and how that comes about. And that's great. That's what I think good design comes from, right? You're testing the waters, figuring out what you like, and you're not being afraid to make those choices and those changes. So yeah, I hope that doesn't come off as preachy. I hope that just comes off as advice, because it's been extremely helpful to me. I'd like to share that. But all that being said, fuck it, let's say this too. I think that's really important as a human being, to not be afraid to change the way that you look. And I'm going to say that because a lot of people get stuck in the same exact look forever, whether it's their hair, their facial hair, the clothing they wear, and I don't get why. Either you have no style or no frame of reference, or you're lazy and you don't feel like changing, or you're content. And if you're content, then that's good. But I think it's really healthy, and I think it's really fun to be able to change your style. If you know anything about me, and you've only seen me once on YouTube, but as we go forward, you should probably see it a bit more. But I tend to change my hair, my facial hair, the color of my hair, or the clothes that I'm wearing quite a lot. It's changed quite a lot over the years. So I think it's a healthy thing, because again, it helps you figure out who you are. And that's huge. And obviously once you get older, maybe you've solidified that, so maybe you don't want to change as much, but I think it's healthy. I think it's good to not always take yourself too seriously, where you feel like you can't change something because your look is defined by that one key trait, right? Like you have you have a beard, you've always had a beard, so you're afraid to shave your beard. Well, just shave your damn beard. Like, why the hell not? What are you doing? Like, it's gonna grow back, but you never know if you don't try. So I think I know this isn't about this, but I think it's important to not be afraid of risk and be able to take those chances, even if they're little things. They still matter. And they matter, because if you're afraid to do it, then it clearly matters to you. So take that for what you will. But, tangential thoughts here. Sorry. We're getting into more than character work. We're getting into our own characters. Damn, that's deep as hell. Okay. Anyway, let's finally talk about this damn picture. So, here we have returned to English JOS, okay? I had played around with different colors of hair. I went back to brown here. I had made him English. I had actually finally started to put some work into his aesthetic, more so than his face. So I was like, okay, I'll give him a vest. I'll give him a white collared shirt. I wouldn't do the high straight collar. I thought that'd be fun as opposed to a traditional collar. Give him a thin tie. It's like that kind of makes him feel butlery, so he has maybe an intelligence to him, which he definitely does. Yeah, so I really like that. Again, we have the full mutton chops here. And the last drawing, I think we shortened them up a little bit, but we brought them fully back. No mustache, I got rid of it. but the general nose aesthetic has finally come to a point where it starts to live a little bit. So in the last drawing, I took away kind of the hump in his nose, the larger nose that he had. It had been straight sometimes, but it had been primarily humped. So I had taken that away, but I kind of gave him this, not bulbousy, but let's say bulbousy. You can see how his nose kind of sticks forward a little bit towards the end. It's got a little bit more prominent ending to it. I tried to really make sure that was a key feature of his face, where in the past it might have been there, but I made his mouth and jowl chin area significant. I wanted to make the nose feel more balanced with that chin now, give him a longer face. If you remember when I did like the Wolverine looking one, his face was actually more squat, which made him maybe look more muscular or shorter. I want him again to feel longer, thinner, svelte, if you will. Yeah, we've kept the gray eyes. We have given him a little bit more color to his face than when he was ghostly white with orange hair, looking like an Irish ghost of some kind. But what we have done now is we have kept the slicked back hair. We've kept it textured, so it has a body and it has maybe attitude to it. It's not purely slick. So it can kind of fall on his face, which I thought would be really fun. But yeah, I think that kind of covers this specific image. Let's go to the next one, which is the same Joss. However, we now have him in a little bit of a more character type pose. So here he is, again, smoking his veil. You can see it's manifesting in a hat. We've gone back to the bowler. We've made that look a little bit different, right? We've kind of given it a little bit of a smoky eye in this image. But you can see his hair can hang down and makes him look a little bit more sinister, where he's not looking at you, but the hat is looking at you. Yeah, I really like this. Again, this was all pretty recent. But I still knew it wasn't exactly correct. I knew I was really close, but I wasn't quite there. The next one is essentially the final version of Joss, what we're called 4.0. If we open that up, it is not, excuse the middle finger, that's actually not in character for him at all, but I was playing around with the pose and I wanted his arm up and it just worked out really well. So we did a middle finger for, fuck it purposes. But here we have a much more almost on model character version for Joss. He's further away, obviously, so you don't get all of the facial details. So I'm going to call this Joss 4.0, even though maybe it's like a 3.9. But we're going to call this Joss 4.0. Joss 4.0, we have actually come up with a character design as far as costuming. He's got he's got a brown suit. Let's say that first. He has a brown suit with a yellowy orange vest underneath. He's got a white shirt, rounded edges. It's not a high straight collar. It's still a black tie. His coat is very long. I've kind of refined him into that is subject to change, but as far as the exact year, but basically late 1800s into early 1900s, but English aesthetic. We've kept the swoop back hair. It's still kind of disheveled and can fall around. He's got large mutton chops, but we've brought back the mustache. We decided at this point, and I say we as in myself. I have decided, but we sounds better. So we have decided, because I'm fucking Smeagol. But we have decided that the mustache was worth keeping. It gave a lot of character to his expressions. So you have to think anytime he emotes or talks, that mustache is right in the middle of his face. So it's going to move around, it's going to twitch, it's going to have a lot of shape language. And while I liked the last version with the brown hair and no mustache, I was at the point again where I felt like he felt a little too harsh, a little too unapproachable. Like he needs to ride that line in my brain where he can be cold and cruel and cynical, but he can be friendly and approachable and good-hearted. And I think this aesthetic really works. I think his hair color blends with his outfit very well. I think the chin and the nose are still really prominent. He's got the gray eyes, but he's finally at a point where he feels like Joss to me, which is nice. Again, this has been like, I'm rough approximating because I was always terrible about dating my drawings. I never had dates written on any of them, so that's the good thing about going digitally now. But that I can actually know when I did some of these. But this is like a 10-year journey for this character, and that's nuts because I have changed a lot in 10 years, and I think that shows. And we can put Joss 1.0 versus Joss 4.0 on screen, and they look nothing alike. I don't think you would ever be able to know it was the same character, and that is really cool to me. That I have the evidence to show how a character can change in such a vast way and still have roots to the same intent, which is cool. Like that's a cool feeling. He's changed, he's grown in his design and his background and in every single way, but I know that he is the same character, the same genesis of an idea, and I really, really like that. So I wanted to share this process. I wanted to provide that journey. Again, I've said that this channel isn't really for artists necessarily. I want it to be kind of for everybody. So I try to approach it from a place that it's not solely about, art as in teaching, because I don't want it to be that, but I want it to be about the process, right? What it's like to make a character. I want people who don't create art to be able to watch this and find intrigue and maybe better understand their friends that do make art, or just have insight into how that process works, and knowing that it can be really damn hard. It might be easy to look at a final piece and be like, oh, that's cool, okay, next. Like, don't like, swipe past it, whatever you want to do, but there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it, and a lot of laboring, especially for this character. Again, like I said, like 10 years roughly, and he's come a long way, and he's still not done. For clarity at this point, like, I'm actively working on my graphic novel, but it's early still. I've written chapters, but we've not, and I have notes about how shots are going to look visually when I draw them all out, but mostly it's been finalizing character designs, finalizing backgrounds, finalizing story. So we haven't even drawn the first chapter of the graphic novel at this point. So it feels weird to talk about this, but I know that where the character is where he will be going forward, which is why I feel good making this video and why I wanted to share that process. Because I think you do know, once you get to a point, it's like anything, like, when it feels right, and it's good to trust that instinct. It's good to challenge yourself and change, like I've said, but it's also good to trust when you feel that it's right internally. So yeah, that's Joss. That's the genesis of a character and the entire journey of how they can change throughout your life. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope it was insightful, or you might have learned something. If you did, I would love to know about it. Feel free to comment, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. I said all those things without stuttering. I've been really enjoying making videos. I hope you've been enjoying watching them. And yeah, until next time, see you then.